plan for today is take you through a few what we consider to be the most important key points to hit, and then probably have a lot of time for questions and answers and just addressing any issues that you have.
So the first, just kind of starting at the beginning, we're thinking about what is the timeline for navigating the academic job search, and it's highly variable, as you can see by the months I listed here, but the point is that you have to start looking for jobs early. So thinking about when you anticipate finishing, and then backtracking from that all the way till about August is when you'll start seeing. There are job postings all year round, but you'll start to see lots of them coming up in August, and then throughout August, September, October, when most things come out.
And they'll continue to come out all year long.
Yeah.
So depending on the cycles of different universities.
Yeah.
Postdocs and whatnot.
And not every position will have an application deadline, but it's better to think that they will. And those deadlines, I found the earliest to be like October 15th. Maybe there was an October 1, I can't remember. And then a ton like November 1st or November 15th.
Mm-hmm.
They started to be due around then. And then, as the job postings that come out later have later deadlines. So it kind of goes that way as well.
Well, you're talking about sort of the first round of phone and video interviews and flyout interviews. There's also the universities know that they're competing for talent, and so there's, if you see a job that you think is a really great fit for you that comes a little bit later, you may have a university who really tries to move on getting you an offer because they know that university might scoop you up. So there's like a certain amount of
competition for getting things done fast.
And that can be a tough thing to navigate, right? Because you might have a bird in your hand, and then this other thing that might materialize later, but there's no right answer there. But it's something that happens. When navigate.
Yeah. So sometimes there'll be these first round interviews, and then the final stage of everybody's process would be the fly out interviews where you're there for a couple of days and you have a ton of meetings and you give your job to. And we'll spend a bunch of time talking about what that is. After that, you would start hearing about getting offers or not. Okay. Questions about timeline?
Yeah, I guess throughout this, it's
a small group, so please. So one of the things that's important as you're looking at different academic jobs is to recognize that there are different types of academic jobs based on the types of institutions where you might work. So I listed some pretty broad categories here, but applying to a place like the University of Minnesota, that would be an R1 or a research-focused institution. And what that means is that if you got the job there, your job would include a high amount of research. Like right here, it balances with the amount of teaching you're required to do. Liberal arts institutions, so like Hamlin or McAllister, would probably have a little bit more teaching requirements. A teaching-focused institution, so like Mankato State, would tend to have a lot more teaching and less research as part of your job responsibility. Community colleges, so Normandale, something like that, your job would be almost entirely teaching. And then postdocs would be almost entirely research. That's very broad, but typical.
And as we go through, if you want to, do ask follow-up questions, because
Yeah.
we can add our personal experiences. What does it mean to be primarily research focused? It does depend on different institutions, but I can tell you that I teach a 2-2, which is 2 courses in the spring, 2 courses in the fall. That's what's required in my contract. And then if colleagues that I know or jobs that I looked at that were at more teaching focused institutions, it would be 4-4.
Yeah.
So it's double the teaching load, but without the expectation that you're doing research and publishing, or at least doing that as intensively.
And you'll hear people talk also about how their loads are divided. So like here, our load is 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% service. And that breakdown of those 3 categories will, again, differ by the type of institution that you're at. And so those are the types of things you know, should you get to that final round interview, you want to start asking about those things. And thinking for yourself, like what's going to make me happy and fulfilled as a way to spend my time. Because if you don't want to spend 40% of your time doing research, you shouldn't apply to a place like this. It just...
And I don't know, this is probably more of an issue for like negotiating a job offer.
Yeah.
But issues around what are the boundaries? I think there's an active debate, certainly at this institution and across academia, around what counts as research and what's valued for tenure.
Yeah.
If you're in a tenure track job, and you know, here we rhetorically, and we're finding ways to programmatically, at a policy level, value community engaged scholarship, which is to say research where you're out in a community doing work that is generally very time intensive and a lot less publication intensive than traditional scholarship. And traditionally, publication is sort of the coin of the realm in terms of tenure. And so that's kind of a shift in policy that's being negotiated in different ways at different universities.
And yeah.
So if that's the kind of work that you're interested in, or if you're, you want to do research, but you don't want to do the kind of research that is traditionally valued, that's definitely a place where you want to find the right fit with an institution.
And what sort of venues for publication of value can vary by institution as well. So I have a colleague at more of a liberal arts place where publishing in a practitioner journal like Mathematics Teacher is valued just as much as publishing in a research journal. But not all institutions have that value system. So. You guys are going to try to start asking questions soon. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question. What do you mean by service? I mean, you said 10-30
Yeah. So, service is like the work that you do for your department. So sometimes it's just going to department meetings. It includes like being a reviewer for journals. It includes being on different committees. So like Sam and I are both on the research committee. So part of our service obligation is to plan the epistemological dialogues or help choose the graduate paper award winner.
I don't know if you noticed at the faculty meeting that there's a big department review that's going to be put together, and there's a whole section of that that's like, the research committee will have to put this together.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of administrative work that gets done by faculty at a university. And when you're sort of listing it out on your CV, so you say service to the department, service to the university, service to the community, service to the field. So part of the expectation is also that you might be doing things like doing professional development for teachers,
Yeah. Or
being interviewed by the media about your field.
being on a board of a professional organization in your field, helping to plan a conference.
Helping to develop policy. In second language education, a number of my colleagues have worked with people at the Minnesota Department of Education and were instrumental in the LEAPS Act that was passed a few years ago, valuing bilingualism in the schools. So yeah, on the one hand, that's like an additional expectation that you might not be thinking of when you're thinking like, I'm a professor. On the other hand, that's also something that's celebrated. You can go out and do that work and it's counted as part of your professional work that you get awarded for with tenure and such.
Okay, where do you look for jobs once you decide that you want them? There are a handful of sites that are general, like field-wise, and you can set up many of these websites to send you alerts. So like, I set up a job search through the Chronicle of Higher Education, their website. I signed up for an account and a free account, and then I got emails. I chose to get emails every week for specific keywords. So I searched for math education and some related things, and then every week I got lists of jobs that I thought was related to math education. One of my colleagues was searching at the same time. She got her alerts right away, and so she always knew about the jobs before me, but I didn't want my inbox flooded, so the Chronicle or these other websites will have postings from any field, but also if you are in a specific discipline. So, you guys are STEM, so if you're looking at ANTE has a good job board, NARS probably has it, and then STE, yeah. So, I guess I don't know what you're into.
What's up?
Which program?
Culture and teaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the professional organizations that you're associated with will have more sites or more postings. AERA, either the division that you're associated with or any special interest group that you might be connected with, may also have. So, like, I know the math ed one does. You don't know about any others.
Yeah, my field was primarily literacy, so the Literacy Research Association always had lots of job postings. Currently, in the bilingual education SIG with AERA, they have a Facebook page. There's always jobs going up on the Facebook page. It's obviously more useful the more focused you can be. It's also worth noting that when you get involved, if you're going to conferences and you're getting involved in some of these special interest groups, the people who are posting those job searches are the people who you're meeting when you go to the conference and you go and if you're volunteering your time or just attending. But one thing we didn't sort of write in here is the importance of that networking.
Yeah.
One of my colleagues who is just switching jobs, so he was like a third year faculty in Illinois, is going to Florida. We found out about the job in Florida because I was sitting at the bar at AERA with my advisor, and some luminary in the field came by and was like, "Bob, who do you have who I can hire in Florida?"
Yeah, sometimes that's how that goes. Like, that's how you hear about it.
And I was sort of surprised because I was going to conferences throughout my doctoral program because I went to a school that just had tons of funding and that was great. But at first I was a tourist and then kind of thinking about being like presenting and learning the discourse. And then the year that I was on the job market, I was like, oh, everybody is just doing interviews, like line up face-to-face informal interviews. at conferences. So the year that you're on the job market is a great year to be trying to get to conferences, because
It's really,
you can send an email and say, I just sent this application. I want you to know I'm going to be at this conference. If you want to chat, love to meet you.
and think about when the timing of your professional organizations have their conferences, right? ARA is in the spring, which means before you're going on the job market, right? If you were on the
Right.
job market this year and you think, oh, I'll go to ARA to network, it's too late. You've already got your offers or not, because ARA has not yet happened. But like, we've got some math ones that are in November, and that's, I remember, like, all I did was network at that conference while I was on the market, meeting different people with different job opportunities, and getting my friends to introduce me to people who they knew, to introduce me to the people who had the jobs, just so they can put a face to the name on the application. It was very stressful, and I did not like it, but it was necessary.
I had sort of the opposite experience in that I had sent a, so my LRA is in December, and I had sent an application for a job at the University of Reno. And I knew somebody through, actually my wife, weirdly enough, at Reno, and I like looked, and I knew she was at the conference, and I was like, let's talk, job search. It turned out she was on 2 search committees that I had applied to, and was able to give me feedback about my prospects, even though they weren't going to have any communication, which really helped me be strategic in how I was, because I got a job offer like a week later, so I was like, okay, Reno, the chair of the search committee, just told me in a totally informal, friendly conversation that like I would probably get invited for an interview, and that's the kind of thing where like, okay, now I can really. Otherwise, it's like bird in the hand. And I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't just send one application. I sent like 12 applications out, and I don't know what's going to happen with any of them.
Yeah, and so I guess one of the reasons our experiences were so different is because I experienced a lot of rejection at the beginning of my job search, and
Oh, I did too. This was December.
so even then I had not yet.
Oh yeah.
I hadn't landed anything in December. And I will say, this is not my first academic job. I spent a year at Arizona State, so I've been on the job market twice. And so I'm reflecting on the first time around, when I was kind of throwing things out everywhere and stuff was not landing. So I was at these conferences doing the networking, but also having that rejection come back and forth. And I think that's a part of the academic job search that we don't talk about enough. It can be really, really tough. And so I just wanted to name that as like, it can be really tough, and you can still land a position and find a home that makes you happy, right? I'm very happy to be here, and I got here eventually. It just took a lot.
Can you talk a little more about your journey from Reno to Minnesota and yours from Arizona?
I never went to Reno.
Well, the interview.
Yeah. So my journey, I applied. What year is it now? So I guess I sent out applications in the year before I got hired. I was sending out applications, but it was kind of a tentative move. I wasn't really sure if I was ready to finish my dissertation. And so I only sent out like a half dozen applications to the jobs that I was like, if they said yes, I would have to go. Nobody said yes. Possibly they could just see from my transcript that I wasn't quite ready, or who knows, maybe my advisor's reference letter was like, yeah, don't bother hiring him yet, but come back next year. But it was so beneficial to have done that because I had gotten all my stuff together ahead of time. So that the next year, every time you write a cover letter or revise your cover letter for a new institution, that it gets easier and easier and easier. And so then the next year I was like, okay, well now it's a drop dead, like I need to get a job this year. And I was sending out, it kind of ramps up
Yeah.
from October, but by November I was sending out, I'd say there's deadlines like on the 1st and the 15th, right? So it's every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I was probably sending out 6 applications every 2 weeks. By December, my letter writers were starting to hate me, I think. I'd gotten a few Skype interviews, which was not a thing until recently, and it's now becoming, I think, pretty ubiquitous. A lot of institutions, they want that first touch to help them eliminate, because they spend a lot of money to fly. You know, they'll usually fly around 3 people out to interview. And so they don't want to waste that money. They don't want to end up finding that none of those 3 people are going to work out after all. So I had gotten a couple of Skype interviews, and otherwise nothing, you know, some explicit rejections. A lot of stuff was just still pending. And then in December, I ended up getting the invite to come out here. And the Reno job was percolating, optimistic, but their timeline was like February for invitations. And so after I interviewed, they moved really fast on an offer, and I had to decide, like, which am I more interested in? And it wasn't that I was more interested in Reno and took this job. It was a pretty easy decision. It was a great job. I'm really happy that I ended up here. But yeah, it was definitely nice to be in a position where you feel like you have options. I definitely had colleagues, tremendously skilled, amazing scholars who should have been snapped up by anybody, but who really had to wait around until quite late in the process and undergo a lot of stress in the spring.
Yeah, and I will say also, like I had a colleague who, her field is philosophy of education, and there really just aren't jobs. So she was like, I'm applying and applying and applying and getting all this rejection, and she doesn't have anything to apply to. So there are different ways that it can be a challenge. So my story has a lot of similarities, but some differences. So I also, like the year before, was like, well, let's just kind of do a lab practice application, essentially. It's like, this job could be a fit, I'm gonna try it out, forced me to get my materials together, but I definitely wasn't close. I needed the next year to actually finish my dissertation and have that be good, and then really be on the job market. And so similarly, then I just started applying and applying. One of the things about my situation is a little bit unique, is that there were 3 of us in math education that were all applying at the same time. And so we, of course, would be applying to the same jobs, which meant we needed to kind of work with each other, because we were very good friends also. It's like, how do we navigate this as we're all applying to the same things, and some of us are going to get them and some of us aren't. How do we want to talk about that? How do we want to handle it? So we worked on thinking about that. I did a lot of applying. A lot of places you never really hear back from. It's like, okay. And I got a lot of rejection, and then I think it wasn't until January or February where I finally got some first round interviews. So there was kind of like the first round of jobs, which was the calendar we put up, and then there was like the people who were late to the game. And that's when I started landing some things. A little bit because other folks who I'd been competing with in the past, I think, had been snapped up. Right? They had committed, they were done, out of the market, and now it's like, now people could look at mine and be like, oh yay. What were we missing before? So then finally it started moving faster for me, and so I had flyouts in February and March and offers in March. And I ended up like having job talks at a teaching focused place, a more liberal artsy place, and then a research one place. and then had to figure out what was going to be the best fit for me. And I chose to go to Arizona State. And then the next year, the job came open here at Minnesota, and this is where I'm from, this is where my family lives, and I desperately did not want to be on the job market again because I hated it. But I also wanted to move home, and you don't know when those opportunities come up. So I applied, and there's a big difference between being on the job market and applying for one job. And so it was two very different experiences, right? If I didn't get the Minnesota job, it's not like I was looking for something else. I was looking for that or staying where I was. But once I got the offer here, there was no staying in Arizona. So I don't know if that helps.
It occurs to me that on the processing rejection tip, there are all kinds of reasons why you might not
Yeah,
rise to the top of a search,
yeah,
including that the search description was not written accurately or
they didn't know what
Even-
they wanted when they were writing the search description.
even honestly.
Right,
They may know exactly what they want, have a person in mind, but by university policy be required to
Yeah.
make a wider search. And so they're just looking to like
yeah,
go through the motions so that they can hire the person that they want.
yeah. So it'll feel like it's about you when you get rejected, but it's not.
And if you ever get the chance to work on a search committee, which some of you may have the opportunity to do, a lot of times they do have student participants, it's a great
I highly
opportunity.
recommend doing that if you're presented that opportunity.
And you'll be able to see that there's also, within a department there are competing visions over where they want a program area to go, and those debates are in play throughout the entire hiring process until it's finished. And so there's a lot going on behind the scenes that doesn't necessarily relate to your particular
Right.
application. So yeah, I didn't take it personally at all.
Do you have any experience of searching the job outside of US? Or do you know where you can find
No.
the job?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I wasn't looking outside the US, although, I mean, I wasn't looking outside of North America. I did apply to a job in Canada. But it's not, I wasn't really looking internationally.
You do see, I don't know, you do see some jobs, international jobs
On these sites.
On these sites.
Yeah.
You mean
So-
just the full
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and I forget which ones, and obviously it depends, I mean, these sites are populated by
Whoever
search
submits,
committees
yeah.
submitting them. But I toyed with some, there was a job in Canada.
Yeah,
My sister lives in Hong Kong, there was a job in Hong Kong that I was toying with applying to.
yeah. You can filter your searches by geography as well.
There may in fact be better, more specific country, I have no doubt, but this is a way to start for sure.
Yeah. And also asking your networks, like if you are thinking internationally because you know somebody at an institution somewhere, ask them to connect you with what's the right group in this country to look for job postings. So network.
Is there a country you're looking at?
I'm just thinking, when I read the article about my research area, I sometimes the article published it in Australia or
Yeah.
England, but I'm not sure how can I find the jobs in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the English speaking countries will post on these sites. Australia or New Zealand are on a different academic schedule, so their jobs will come out at different times because their summer is our winter, so their calendar is just different.
I have one close colleague who ended up getting a job in Korea. I don't know a lot about the search process, but if anybody's interested in a job in Korea, I would be happy to
Yeah.
put you in touch. Move on.
Yes, what does it take to apply for a job? It varies, but any job you apply for is gonna want a cover letter and a CV. And then some of the applications may want a research statement, they may want a teaching statement, they may want writing samples, some combination of those things, or maybe something else altogether.
In my, I would say any research-oriented position will ask for a writing sample, in my experience.
That was not my experience.
Right.
Some would,
Might be the field, I don't know.
it might be the field, it also, some places wanna collect everything they can at the beginning, and some want the bare minimum of information at the beginning, because they're just gonna do first round cuts anyway.
That's true.
Uh,
They might follow up and ask for things.
Yeah, I had 2 institutions ask for a diversity statement.
Oh, yeah,
That's becoming
that's
much more
becoming, and
common, true.
I was at the meeting yesterday, they were saying the University of California system asks everybody for a diversity statement. Yeah, so thank you for that.
So tailoring the document for each institution, I'd say broadly speaking, I had like a teaching forward CV and cover letter and a research forward CV and cover letter because I was applying to both kinds of jobs. And they were very similar, but they were just, instead of saying, here's where I got my degrees, here are my research interests, here are my publications, I had one that said, here's where I got my degrees, here are my teaching licenses, here's my professional experience as a teacher in the courses that I've taught at the university level. So the same information. Similarly, my cover letter was this, the same basic information, maybe I had 2 research paragraphs to 1 teaching paragraph at the research institutions and vice versa. But then within that, tailoring is also, really look at the job description and do a little homework on the institution and try to sort of think about where those connections are and what excites you about the institution, where do you see your work fitting into their vision. In another couple of slides, I don't know, is it soon? It's a little ways away, I'll show you kind of the eagle's eye view of what that might look like.
One thing not to do, a friend of mine was on a search committee and they got a cover letter addressed to the wrong institution. So proofread, but actually tailor, right? We know you're sending the same cover letter everywhere, right? But you need to change the parts that need changing. Make sure you're editing those things. Right, and it's listing the ideas for the institutions, and you'll find it's very similar. You can use really similar sentences from institution to institution. But proofread.
Oh, and that process got down to a science.
Oh yeah.
The first 6 cover letters I wrote were pretty substantially different. The last 6 cover letters I wrote, I had highlighted sections that I would just switch out. So I basically had a template that was 90% filled, and then I had say something about the institution here.
Yeah. Borrow the language they use in their job description for those paragraphs. Then they'll know that you're talking about what they're talking about.
Or at least that you read the job description.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that becomes transparent. As somebody on a search committee, you read it and you're like, okay, they used this strategy where they took some language from the thing and they put it in. And when you read 25 of these, it becomes, it can become more clear And it's not a bad thing. It just says, I've got to follow up and really get to the bottom of whether that's somebody's application strategy or if they really mean what they say. But it's better to do that than to say, oh, this person doesn't seem to have read anything about our institution or care that much.
Yeah.
It's a really easy way to put that into the not interested file.
Yeah, you're gonna need references, and when you need them depends on the application, and how many you need depends on the institutions. So I found many, like you submit everything, including your reference letters. Other places, and my writers preferred these other places, are like, they only ask if you are moving forward in the search. Like, why bother getting a letter from everybody if they're just gonna cut you anyway? It's like a lot of extra work.
Although so much of that is automated, right? When you apply, you're going to get onto an automated system. You're going to fill out a form. You're going to upload your documents. You're going to put in the contact information for your references. And I found, to the degree that I knew, a lot of times, the moment I hit send, it just bounced an email to my references.
Yeah, I found it really variable.
Yeah, sometimes not.
And like, the automated systems varied a lot too, right? Is it a university system or like in mathematics, not math education, they use a site called mathjobs.org and everything just filters through there. And it's a very different system because everybody uses that same home base as opposed to like each university having their own HR job processing system versus just emailing stuff to a search committee, because I saw that too.
Yeah. Just to sort of reinforce the importance of networking, right? If I'm on a search committee and I know, and someone has said they're planning to apply, and I'm excited about their application, and I don't see it in the file, I can follow up with that person. Or if I see their application but I haven't gotten all their references, depending on how HR is organized, maybe I don't see it in the file because it isn't released to the search committee until all the references are in. So someone who's excited about you will follow up and smooth out some of those logistical wrinkles that can make you miss a deadline.
I know something people can get concerned about, and I don't know if this applies to interviews, who to ask to be your letter writers. Typically you'll need 3 at a minimum. Some places will ask for more than that. Unless there's some big issue, your dissertation advisor should be one of your writers. And then the other people who you ask to write for you should be people who can speak to different aspects of your strengths. And so maybe they know you in different capacities and can comment on different things that you do well. So in my brainstorming for this lab, I was like, well, somebody who knows how you're doing research, and maybe that research is separate from your dissertation research, or somebody who has known how you teach or how you interact with students, which is why I put those up on the list there. But there are other categories, so maybe it's somebody you TA for, or maybe it's somebody who knows your writing well. They don't all have to be people from your institution if you have a strong relationship with somebody at a different place. So like Kyle, because you have that relationship with Judith, she could be a reference writer for you, right? People who know you in different capacities is the aim, I guess, of putting together your set of references. Do you have anything to add for that?
As a person who's been in search committees, does it look favorably one way or the other? Like if all 3 of your references are all university mentors from the university, like professors that you worked under, versus having 2 and having 1 from the community, or like does one?
I don't think it. I mean, all of my references were from my department,
Mine
from
too.
my university, and But, you know, one of them was my advisor, one of them was someone I had done some research work with in a different capacity, and one was just a professor I had a great relationship with, who I thought could speak to my writing and to my thinking about, and in a totally different, you know, someone in learning sciences. So,
so I said it all from my institution. That isn't totally true. I had 2 advisors, so each of them wrote a letter for me. And then my third one is somebody who I was adjuncting at a different institution, and he was our sort of supervisor, and he wrote a letter for me as well. And when I needed a 4th letter, then there was somebody else at the institution, again, kind of knew me in a different capacity.
it also depends on what you're selling yourself
Right.
to be able to do. I'm thinking about a lot of the doctoral applications I've been reading, that people who have been doing projects with, doing a research project with one community or another, or with a school, that school leader writes a letter to talk about the relationship that they've had. I had one application that asked for 4 references, and the person who wrote that was someone who I had done, she led a mentorship program for master's degree students. So I had been a mentor, and she was my supervisor and could speak to that. Next slide. All right. So I threw this slide together in terms of like how you communicate with your references. Up at the top is the email that I received from Debbie Rowe when she agreed to be my reference, and I think it's obviously you don't want to inundate your references with information they don't want. You want to make it really efficient, and it was really nice of her to just be like, here's what I want. But having this conversation with any of your references is good. And this list, I think, is probably pretty good for any of them. So she wanted the CV so that she could, the link to the position announcement, the name. She wanted my letter. And of course, once I was sending 6 a week, I started sending a letter to my references that looked like this, where I was like, this is the same letter you've read a dozen times. The highlighted sections are what I changed for this institution. And then to go back here, I also created a spreadsheet, and you can't really read it, but it says, green is references needed by the due date. All the other ones are, they'll let you know when they want them. And then the blue ones, I marked it when I had completed it. And I was sending this out. I was basically sending out a little email that was like, here's what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. Like, here's the spreadsheet for the next 2 weeks. Here's some other ones that might be coming up in the next 2 weeks, but I'll let you know. And like all the links and information that could help them. I am sure that they were doing the same thing with their letter of reference that I was doing with my cover letter, which is they were tweaking a document based on that info. So.
And I will just say, like, I had 2 advisors who had very different work styles, and they wanted, you needed to help them with your references in different ways because they worked in different ways. So asking each letter writer what's the best way to get this stuff done is really, really important to do.
So we talked a little bit about the phone interview or the Skype interview as something that's becoming more something of an intermediary step that didn't used to necessarily be a part of the process. I remember, I didn't put this in here, but the great thing about a Skype interview is that you control the interface, right? So I was able to use a room at my institution, and I worked with the IT guy for the department to make sure that I was set up well. I moved a potted plant so that I had a nice background.
Yeah.
I also set up my computer against a wall, And I had like index cards on my wall with all the stuff that I, you know, like when they asked me about my research, I've got my 3 bullet points and I've got, you know.
I had like Post-its on my computer, and I put my computer up on books because the camera is here, and if your computer's down here, then you're like looking down the whole time. You want to have the camera at your eye level, so it's like raised up. And you want to know what's behind you, so it's not distracting. I also did like a practice Skype interview, and so I sat in my advisor's office, and my advisor and some of the other math ed folks sat in the conference room, and they interviewed me over Skype. But so we could just, like, it was a practice interview, but we also practiced with that medium to make sure the technology was working and that I was looking in the right places, and all of that was kind of sorted out.
It's a weird phenomenon.
Yes.
I remember I was on a group interview, so I had 4 pictures, but one of them like didn't have video, and so I just had this like this icon of a person that would pulse when she spoke. So I mean, whatever. It's the modern age. I think
Yeah.
we're used to the strange exigencies of
Yeah.
computer conversations, but
I found the Skype, or some for me were also phone, but they tended to be time bounded. They were like, we're going to interview you for 25 minutes or for 35 minutes or whatever it is. They would just kind of set a time. And the committee may have a set of questions that they want to make sure to get through for everybody. So it's a little bit less dynamic than a later, like when we get to the campus visit, and it's really based on you getting to know each other.
no, it's very true. And I think probably for them it was 2 hours
Right.
hitting 10 people,
Yeah.
or something like that, where they're sort of pounding through the first round interviews.
Yeah. When you're doing these, if you're not applying locally, pay attention to time zones. Make sure you're communicating about what time zone is which. Being in California for grad school, I had an interview, a Skype for East Coast, and so I was up at 5 in the morning because they wanted to do an 8 a.m. interview, and they want to do it right now, and let's just do it. Okay. And even if it's a phone interview, but definitely first, you gotta dress professionally, even if they can't see you. Like, dress up in your job interview suit, whatever that format takes, so that you feel like you're like putting yourself up to be a big deal.
I went out of my way to, during the 2 phone interviews I've had, to do them in the conference room in the STEM Center, so that I wasn't at home. Like, I was scared if I was at home, I was gonna be too not focused or whatever.
Yeah.
I have to lock my cat in the room. That's my biggest worry.
Yeah.
Looking.
Right. And if you don't have a place, I mean, ask your advisor if you can borrow their office for an hour, so you can lock the door and it'll look professional. Maybe you're not if you're in my office.
But Post-its and note cards, I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, definitely do
Yeah.
that.
I got that from one of my colleagues, one of my peers, and he had it like color coded. It was very pretty. You can do that like on a window, and you're really nicely lit. You've got all the stuff in front of you. You're focused up here, right? So you're not like looking down. It's very tricky.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, and then as far as when you get to the campus visit, things you can expect, it's usually maybe 2 days, 2.5 days. Every minute of your time is scheduled. Even your downtime is like highly scheduled. I've only done the one at this point, although I've certainly been around while other folks have visited my institution and seen how that works. But you're always going to have a talk that you give. If it's a research institution, it'll be about your research. Is my battery dying, I think? So,
Well, I can put it up on there.
I might have to switch chairs, but, yeah, do a quick switch
So-
out.
I've done 4, I guess, job talks, or campus visits, I mean. And it definitely varies by the time, and I was at very different institutions, so the types of things that got scheduled varied a lot by institution. So like one of the places I went was a teaching institution, and they actually were scheduling talks so that you could teach a lesson in their methods class. And which meant, because it only meant once a week, that their interviews were scheduled out over, they were bringing in 4 candidates, it was like over 4 weeks, which meant I had to wait a long time to hear, because I went first. When I came here, I did just a job talk, like a research talk. At the teaching institution, they had me talk about my research, but, sorry. But like informally, like we had a research lunch where we all sat around a conference table and chatted about my research interests. At a different institution, I gave a research talk and they wanted me to teach a sample lesson. So I taught a lesson and then talked about my teaching to the faculty. And so I had to ask them to pretend to be students, which was a little bit different vibe than teaching actual students, where you're coming into their class. So yeah, those are the different types of those things I've done. And how long you'll spend on your, like how long they give you for the job talk may vary a little bit, but usually you want to aim for it to be 45 minutes talk and save time for questions. Save time for questions. Don't let your talk go the whole hour. It's not good.
Yeah, then you have a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously there's a search committee that interviews you. And search committees are organized in different ways, but, you know, usually the search committee is the one who's going to like generate a report for the entire faculty. And depending on the institution, it might be a faculty vote, or there might be some other mechanism. You meet with the dean, and of course, along this process, it's good to like figure out who your allies are if you can, and ask questions. You always want to ask questions, but you know, the meeting with the dean is usually the relationship of the dean to the department that's hiring you is usually a little bit of an ally and a little bit of an adversary, and the department knows that whoever they're going to want, they have to sell to the dean. So asking your host how to sell yourself to the dean is not necessarily not out of bounds, I would say. And they may volunteer some of this information, but you know, and you don't want to be Machiavellian in your delivery, but you could say, you know, is there anything I should know? And as I'm preparing to meet the dean, and people will tell you.
Yeah.
What's most interesting to the dean, and you talk about those things. Usually meet with students.
Yeah.
And a lot of departments really care what the students have to say. You know, it's kind of easygoing. It's usually over a meal.
Yeah.
Students are usually really happy because they're getting taken out to a meal at some nice place.
Yeah.
But they'll give some feedback. And again, ask questions. Like ask questions at every meeting that you go. Have some ready, because
Everybody's going to ask you what questions you have, and you should have them.
Yeah.
And questions that show interest and knowledge, and like, you don't want to ask a question that you could find an answer to by reading the front page of their website, right? That shows lack of preparation. You want to ask questions that demonstrate you are interested in this position. and want to learn more about the context and environment of the institution.
And it's always this interesting back and forth, not back and forth, but on the one hand, you're selling yourself to them, and on the other hand, they're selling themselves to you. And you feel that when you're there,
Yeah.
right? You're being courted, which is kind of fun. But you're also being judged, which is super, super scary. So that's just something to kind of know that you're going to be navigating.
Yeah.
I think I was the last person to be interviewed when I came here, and that was an issue. You know, like
Yeah.
I had like a dinner out with my program area colleagues, and they were so visibly relaxed. They're like, "Oh, we're done." We can just chill out. But again, you know, like, "Oh, we're all relaxing, like we're colleagues, but I'm not your colleague yet, so I have to like."
Yeah.
I have to show you that I can have fun, but I can't have too much fun.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance.
Yes, yeah.
I'll share that there was a visiting or interviewing future faculty member. I think she's going to join us in the fall.
Yes, yes.
And oh great, and I was at the student lunch, and there was about, I think 4 of us, maybe 5 of us, I know you joined in between too. And she talked to each one of us and asked us about things, and I can't remember now if she actually jotted notes. She must have.
She was definitely taking notes.
Right, wasn't
Yeah.
she? She had her planner up.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we obviously had a really good conversation about one aspect of my research, and she, 2 days later, sent me an email with a link for a paper, and I was just so impressed, like blown away that, you know, and she barely ate her lunch, and I remember saying to her, you know, you need to eat your lunch, this is like your only time you have to eat, and she was so packed, but I was really impressed when I got the email from her. It was a very short email, but she was like, great talking to you, here's the link to the paper that,
Yeah.
you know, related to what we talked about, and I was just like, wow, that's...
Yeah, you should plan on sending thank you or follow-up emails to everybody that you meet with.
Including students, wow.
Yeah,
Or if you want.
or like if you meet with a group of students and you don't collect everybody's email address, you can send a generic, like, to all of you students, it was really great to know you, and here are my, you know, one thing that stood out from our conversation. And it seems like a great place, and thank you for taking me to lunch.
Which reminds me, because I was on the same search committee, she also brought what she was learning forward into other conversations, right? So when you asked her what questions she had, she said, well, when I had lunch with the graduate students, they said this, which was again, clear that she's like highly engaged and like really, you know, she came across as someone who was also like trying to figure out if it was the right fit, right? That and to a certain degree, that made me feel at least that like, yeah, we need to sell ourselves a little bit because this person isn't playing around, isn't like desperate to have us like her. And I don't know if that came out, but.
You may also do I didn't put this on the thing, it just occurred to me. They may take you on a campus tour or a tour of some variety. If that's on your itinerary, think about what shoes you're wearing and what the weather will be in that place. So how can you look professional when it's negative whatever is a reasonable question that you should think about.
Yeah, they're pretty proactive about getting that information here because they know
Right, because they
that a
know.
lot of people aren't ready for that.
Did you talk about your dissertation?
Yes.
Or how much was your portion to talking?
So your job talk will be presenting on the research you've done for your dissertation. And that will then come out a lot in the rest of the talk. People will ask you different questions about that research. So you want to show that you've got like important findings, and you want to show that this isn't the end. right? These people are gonna be hiring you to be their colleague and to continue being a productive researcher. At a research institution anyway. So your dissertation isn't the only research you're ever gonna do if you want to have an academic job. And you need to show that you are proactively thinking about what are the next steps, how you're building on what you've done in your dissertation. A lot of people ask, like, what grants do you plan to apply to, or what journals do you plan to submit to get a sense of what you know about your field. So showing that you have a trajectory for your research is important, building on your dissertation.
And I don't know how true this is at other institutions, but my research statement and my teaching statement in a revised form are still something that I submit every year to my merit committee, right? So that sense of like this trajectory of research that I dreamed up in order to send out applications when I didn't really know better, that's becoming realized as time goes on. And because I'm putting it out there, opportunities come, right? So I talked about video analysis and like innovative methods for video analysis is something that I'm interested in, kind of aspirationally, frankly. I mean, I've done a lot with video analysis and I've thought a lot about, and I've looked at other people doing really interesting, innovative stuff, and I want to get into that. Because that's out there, when I meet with my department chair, she's like, you've got this thing that you've been talking about, why don't you use that to propose a course and start doing this X, Y, and Z? I think there's because we hired you because we saw that as an area that our department could benefit from. So, I don't know, that's just sort of a note about this isn't just about your application too. It can, as you're projecting forward, as tentative as you might feel about that work of envisioning really does work for you, or can. So.
Should we go on?
Sure.
I don't think we have that many slides left. Yeah, just 2 slides left. These are the things that we would just kind of dreaming up as general advice.
And most of it we've already talked about.
Yeah. Start drafting things early, because you're going to be writing your dissertation at the same time as you're on your job. Often, you're writing your dissertation at the same time as being on the job market, and each of those things is a full-time job. So, as much of a running head start as you can give yourself, I recommend it.
That fall is very
It's-
time consuming.
yeah.
It's sort of surprising.
So, have kind of outlines or drafts that you can tailor. Like if you've got that in June or July, you'll be a much happier person. So, spreadsheets to organize. Oh yeah, this one I just added. One of the things, so I mentioned that I was on the market at the same time as colleagues applying for common jobs, and so having built in a support system around that initially was really good. But the other thing that I had, there were a group of us, I don't know, 5 or 7 people. We met weekly. None of us were in the same field, and we were just a job application support group. We read one another's files. We had a shared Dropbox where we put any resources we came across. And just, whoever could come, but we were intentional to be in different fields so we could get an outside eye on our materials. And even though we were all going through it and we didn't know any better, right, it was still a super helpful support system. So we just reserved a conference room and met regularly. And gave whatever support anybody needed on a given day. references we talked about. Yeah, practice your interviews, practice your job talks. Your cohorts here, it'll be good for them to watch you practice, and you'll help them practice when it's their turn, right? It's kind of a pay-for system. Go to job talks. Even if CNI isn't hiring, like go to something in Insight or LPD, just so you get a sense of the style. Other tips? One place, so I guess this goes to our next slide too, but one resource that I didn't put up here, but that I found super helpful is there's a blog called The Professor is In. And the author, her name is Karen Kelsey. She posts sometimes on the Chronicle Ohio website as well. She has tips on the academic job search, really detailed, like how to sound like a professional and not like a grad student. Because you're going to be their colleague, not their students. You want to come across as someone who will be their colleague. What to wear. How to navigate, how to negotiate, all of these things. So some of her advice is so specific, like around what to wear. So I took her blog post about what you should wear to the store as I was shopping. I was like, okay, the Professor and lady says I need to wear this and this, so help me find these things in the store. Because I didn't know, I didn't own a suit, right? We are not a field that dresses like business people, but for your interview, you need to dress like a business person, essentially, in a way that suits you. So I found her advice very helpful. And then we were just digging around. These are some U of M resources, additional resources that we.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't talk about that I think both of us took advantage of at our institutions was professional development.
Yeah.
Done
Like this.
in-house, right? And I think the CEHD Career Services link is basically like, here's the phone number for CEHD Career Services. But the graduate school has a whole bunch of things listed in terms of like interview workshops, CV workshops, and it's the graduate school, so it's not field specific. It's not even college specific, but I took part in an interviewing workshop that was helpful, and a CV workshop that was helpful.
Yeah.
And not and some of it was helpful because I was sitting in a room thinking about my CV, right? Like, if I got like heard something helpful with half of the things that I heard, the other half of the workshop, I was sitting there like actually writing notes, and as opposed to the rest of my day when I was distracted by trying to write my dissertation.
Right. Yeah. And I went to some workshops on like crafting your research statement and crafting your teaching statement. That, again, some of it was because I needed the advice, and some of it was because it meant that I was doing those things. I found that we have this future faculty program. I participated in a kind of future faculty seminar when I was in grad school, where I learned about what are the different types of academic jobs out there, what are the different expectations, what's some of that professional lingo to help me navigate this space and figure out what it is I want and I'm looking for in an academic job. So we are out of slides.
Thank you.
So what other questions do you all have? We've got, I think we're scheduled until 2, so we've got plenty of time left for any other questions.
Was there any minimum qualification of your publication capability? One publication or two publications for the research job? Was there any qualification for that? The minimum criteria?
Nothing
No.
explicit. I think it's very variable by the
Yeah.
job you're applying to. I think 1 or 2 publications for a graduate student is awesome. I was very fortunate in that I came into my research team. I started when they were doing data collection, and about right before I started writing my dissertation, we spent a year just pumping out publications that I got to be second author on. So I think I had 5 publications and 1 in the pipeline. And that like blew people away.
Yeah, just so you don't feel overwhelmed by that. I did not have that in any way. I had none. I had some conference proceedings and like good conference proceedings from a competitive and peer-reviewed conference, but not journal publications when I was applying. So, and I still got a job. So it's valuable, and I would agree that the 1 or 2 is like, ooh, they're really,
Right.
that might bump them up on our pile at a research-focused institution, but it's not mandatory.
And they'll probably read them.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not just that it's a number, but if they're really, if you get as far as a
Come
campus
visit,
interview,
yeah.
they'll be reading those. Well, you're welcome to email with any further questions, and or if you want me to share resources like the spreadsheet that I put together or anything else.
Yeah, and I'll
Let me
have,
know.
maybe we'll just have Christine share a link to the slides so people can recall those as well.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming.
Thank you.